Colorado versus James Egan Holmes, case number 12 CR 1522. The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys and the prosecutors are present as well. The record should further reflect that we are outside the presence of the jury. Let's bring in juror number 155 at this time, please. The record should reflect that juror number 155 is now present in the courtroom. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. It's my understanding that you wanted to speak with me.
Yes, sir, and just in full disclosure, I didn't know any of the witnesses, but I did know the interpreter.
Oh, okay. And so you wanted to let us know that
Just wanted to let you know.
How do you know the interpreter?
He's a pastor at the Indonesian part of the church that I attend.
Do you speak Indonesian?
Not at all.
No, okay. I was going to ask you if he did a good job interpreting.
He speaks excellent English, though.
Okay, that's good. All right. Anything about your knowledge of the interpreter that you think would affect your ability to be fair and impartial as a juror in this trial?
Not at all.
Okay. Just in interest of full disclosure, you wanted to let us know that.
That's correct.
And I very much appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir. I'll have you go back to the jury room at this time. Thank you. The record should reflect that juror number 155 has now exited the courtroom. I'm assuming that there is no other record that the people are asking me to make. Tish McGuire?
No, Your Honor.
Is there any other record that the defense is asking me to make?
No.
By the way, I realized after we gave a microphone to the last witness that since she was speaking in Indonesian, she really didn't need a microphone. But I bet all the Indonesian-speaking people around the world appreciated that. So. All right, let's bring the jury in, please. Oh, actually, hold on a second, Ms. Eagle. I forgot one housekeeping matter, folks. Did you want to admit the or mark the model that has been used? Is it marked as an exhibit?
Let me ask my paralegal, Your Honor.
Okay. And we don't need to do it now, Ms. Tish McGuire. Just follow up. Don't let me forget about that. I just want to know whether it's been marked. It probably should be marked as something, and we should make a record of it. So let's not forget to talk about that at some point. All right, let's bring the jury in. Yeah, hold on, Ms. Eagle.
I'm really sorry to do this, but one thing I noticed with that last here, making it a little difficult for me to see the witness, statured individual. I'm just concerned that maybe the jurors were having that same issue with the placement. I think the next witness is rather tall, so it's probably not an issue, but I just thought I would mention it.
Okay, I'll ask the jury, make sure that everyone can see the witnesses, okay? All right.
I couldn't see her.
Okay. Well, so are you asking me to move the, I mean, are you saying that you want to see the witnesses, or are you concerned for the jury being able to see the witnesses?
Well, Your Honor, of course I'd like to, but I'm most concerned about the jury.
Right, and the question is, if it doesn't interfere with the jury's ability to observe the witness, is that a problem?
I don't think it is. It's the jury we're concerned about.
All right, great, thank you. Let's bring him in. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that all of the jurors are back in the courtroom. Members of the jury, could I have a show of hands? Does it interfere with your ability to observe the witnesses, to have that screen there? Does that screen interfere with your ability to observe the witnesses? Anyone? No. Great. Nobody's raising their hand. Okay, wonderful. All right, call your next witness, please, Ms. Tish McGuire. Oh, Ms. Pearson, you're up.
People call Sergeant Mike Hawkins.
Good afternoon. Could I have you raise your right hand so I can administer an oath? You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
Please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name?
It's Michael Hawkins.
And can you spell your first and last names?
My first name is Michael. My last name is Hawkins.
Ms. Pearson, you may proceed.
Sergeant Hawkins, where are you employed?
I'm a police officer for the city of Aurora.
How long have you been there?
I've been there 10 years now.
Prior to working at the Aurora Police Department, did you work in law enforcement somewhere else?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Where did you work?
I was a police officer for the city of Inglewood for 11 years.
What did your duties consist of on July 20th of 2012?
I was a police officer assigned to the northwest side of the city, referred to as District 1 of the Aurora Police Department.
What shift did you work at that time?
I worked what's called swing shift, which runs from 3 p.m. till 1 a.m.
Since that time, have you been promoted to sergeant?
Yes, ma'am.
So turning back to July 20th of 2012, did you hear a call asking for officers to respond to the Century 16 Theater?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is that located?
That's located at 14300 East Alameda Avenue, City of Aurora, County of Arapahoe, State of Colorado.
Do you recall what time you heard a call for service to the Century 16 Theater?
At about 12:39 in the morning.
What was the nature of the call or request?
The initial radio transmission was there were shots being fired at the theater.
Where were you at the time that you heard that call?
I was at the District 1 police station at approximately Montview and Potomac.
Were you about to get off work?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
When you heard the call, what did you do?
I turned around and walked back to my patrol car.
Why did you go back to your car?
Based upon the sounds of the radio transmissions, it sounded like a pretty serious call for service.
How long would you estimate that it took you to get from about Montview to the theater?
I would estimate it took under 10 minutes.
How fast were you driving?
When I was up on the highway, I was driving over 100 miles per hour.
What highway are we talking about?
Interstate 225.
As you were responding to the theater, did you see any other police cars responding?
Yes, there was another police car very close behind me.
When you approached the theater, how did you attempt to get into the vicinity of the theater?
I traveled southbound on Sable Street and turned right, which would be westbound into the Aurora Mall theater parking lot.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as People's Exhibit 4741. Sorry. Do you recognize what is depicted on this poster?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What is it?
It's an aerial photo of the Aurora Mall and the Century 16 Theater.
Does it fairly and accurately represent that area?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Are you familiar with that area?
I am.
Your Honor, I'd move for admittance of People's Exhibit 4741.
Any objection?
Yes, sir.
Okay, without objection, 4741 is admitted.
And if you can explain what it is that we see in this exhibit.
Okay, what we see here is, like I said, a aerial photo of the Aurora Mall, which is this big white structure here, and the Century Theater, which is this darker, smaller colored structure here.
Is there an interstate also on this map?
Yes, Interstate 225 is this gray highway right here.
Where would Alameda be?
Alameda would be
Although it's not depicted.
not depicted, it would be approximately up here in this area.
And you indicated that you came in from Sable?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is Sable?
Sable Boulevard is right here.
Where did you turn into the theater?
Right here, which is labeled East Center Point Drive.
And then where did you proceed?
I encountered a wounded man being attended by a road construction crew in this drive, and I bypassed him, and I turned and parked approximately here in the theater parking lot.
And you're pointing to what would be the northeast side of the theater parking lot?
It would be, I think it would be kind of the northwest side of the theater parking lot.
Okay. And although the theater is not exactly due north and due south.
Correct.
If the west would be this direction,
Yes,
east would be the opposite direction?
yes, ma'am.
So if we consider the front of the theater for general purposes to be west, then you would be northwest?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Now, you said that when you first arrived, you saw a man being treated by a construction crew.
A road construction crew, yes.
How, did you determine whether or not he had been involved in anything that had occurred at the theater?
I asked the road construction crew if the man had been shot, and they said yes, he had.
Were they assisting him at that time?
They were.
As you were arriving at the theater, were you getting radio transmissions about what was going on?
Yes, I was.
Were you getting information that you needed to use in order to go into the theater?
I was hearing radio transmissions indicating that there had been tear gas dispersed in the theater and officers needed their gas mask.
At that point, were you being told of any injuries?
I was hearing radio transmissions about there were numerous people that had been shot.
Once you had parked, what did you do?
I parked behind an Aurora fire engine, and I went to that fire engine and I retrieved a firefighter's oxygen tank to wear in the theater.
Is that commonly called a scuba mask?
An SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus.
How did you approach the theater?
I approached the west side of the building, kind of the northwest side of the building.
Did you go in the lobby? How did you gain access to
I ran down the west side of the building to the main doors. As I was going down that west-facing wall, I encountered a woman who grabbed my leg and said, "Can you help my," I believe it was her boyfriend, and I noted that that man had been shot.
Did you stop to assist them?
I did not.
Why not?
My best answer to that is pursuant to our training in active shooters. I went towards what I perceived to be a threat inside the building.
At that time, did you believe that the shooting was still going on inside the theater?
I did, ma'am.
When you entered the theater, and you entered the theater complex, did you enter into the lobby area first?
Yes, I did.
What were your first observations when you entered the lobby?
That the smoke alarm was going off. There was smoke in the hallways of the theater, and there was a plainclothes police officer with a shotgun out that was choking on the tear gas smoke, and he yelled for me to go to Theater 9.
Did you know where Theater 9 was?
He pointed, and I had a rough idea where to go.
Had you been in this theater complex before?
No, ma'am, I had not.
Did you go towards Theater 9?
I did.
Were there any other officers in the lobby at that time?
Yes, the one that I recall most is Officer Cabouet.
And is that C-A-B-O-U-E-T?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do?
I met up with Officer Cabway, and I went into Theater 9 with her.
When you grabbed her, what did you think you were going into?
I felt like we were probably going into some type of gunfight at that point.
Do you recall how you entered into Theater 9?
I do. I went through the main doors, and at that point, the theater splits into a left hallway and a right. I would describe them as aisles. We went down the right aisle.
Would that be directionally as you were facing the front of the theater, how you figure left and right?
I would figure left, as I'm describing it, left and right would be the movie screen, and there's a left aisle and a right aisle. I went down the right aisle.
As you went down the right aisle, what did you see?
One of the first things I encountered was a man who had apparently taken a heavy caliber bullet to the head. Most of his head was gone.
What else did you observe in the theater?
My next recollection is encountering two teenage girls that were not functioning well, and I grabbed them and pushed them out the back door of the theater, at which point I noticed an assault rifle lying on the ground.
When you say they weren't functioning well, what do you mean?
They were extremely upset and crying.
Did you put a gas mask on?
Yes, I was wearing the SCBA at that point.
When you walked into Theater 9, was the movie going?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
How was the air quality inside the theater?
It was heavy with what I would describe as tear gas.
Are you familiar with tear gas?
I am, ma'am.
Were there other officers in the theater at that time?
Yes, there were.
And what were they doing?
Some of them were looking underneath the movie screen, and others were proceeding out the back door of the theater.
Now, after you had the two girls that you encountered that you pushed out the back door, did you go outside or did you just stay in the theater?
I very briefly went outside.
What did you see outside the theater?
I saw that the ground near the rifle was covered in a lot of blood, and I saw officers along the wall of the theater, the exterior wall of the theater, treating wounded people.
Now, you said you briefly went outside. Did
Yes.
you go back in?
I did, ma'am.
And what did you do?
I went back in, and at that point, I noticed that there were a lot of people that had been wounded, and at that point, Sergeant Butler yelled for us to get the wounded out.
How did you accomplish that?
We accomplished that by carrying people out. I approached a man that was lying on the floor who was bald, and he was very pale white, and his eyes were open, and I could see I could see blood and other matter coming from his mouth, and I checked his pulse, and I realized that man was gone.
Had you ever been in an environment like this before?
I have been to homicide scenes, but I have not been in an environment like this.
At some point, did you remove your gas mask?
I did. I saw other officers without their gas mask on, and I removed what I was wearing, and it smelled and tasted like tear gas, but I was able to function in it.
At that point, were any of the officers who were in the theater still wearing gas masks?
I would say that some were and some were not.
Do you have any sense of how many people were in the theater at that time? People who had been patrons, weren't wearing law enforcement uniforms?
I would say that there were still a fair amount of people in the theater. I couldn't approximate a number. The theater was not empty of people.
Do you know how many officers there were in the theater?
There was starting to become more and more police officers in the theater.
Did you see other people in the theater who appeared to have been injured?
I did, ma'am.
Who else did you see?
My next recollection is a woman next to the man that had died on the floor. She had been shot in her calf, and a large portion of her calf was missing. Officer Baker and I lifted her over a railing, and Officer Baker carried her out. And from there, I turned around and I found a heavy-set teenage boy on the floor. He was curled up in a fetal position, and he had been, I could tell that there was a bullet wound in his back. I couldn't tell how, but I got down and I spoke with him, and he whispered, "Help me, I'm dying." And I said, if you can talk to me like this, you're going to be okay. And 2 police officers carried him out.
Did you see other victims?
I did, ma'am. My next recollection is Sergeant Johnsgard motioned me over, and there was a girl about 6 years old on the floor.
Did he ask you to do something with regard to this little girl?
Yes, he lifted up her shirt and showed me where she had been shot once in the abdomen. And I tried to obtain her pulse, and I could not.
Why not?
At that point, my own hands were really tingling and pulsing, I would guess from adrenaline.
Were you asked to do something with regard to her?
Yes, Sergeant Johnsgard yelled for me to get her and go.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And you picked her up?
I picked her up and I ran out of the front entrance of the theater.
When you ran out of the front entrance, did you see people looking at you carrying her?
Yes, I did.
How did they respond?
They all let out a scream and moved out of my way.
Could you tell whether or not she was alive?
At the point that I was running out with her, I became aware of her bleeding all over me, and I became aware of her bladder voiding on me, and I looked down at her and I realized that she was probably gone.
Where did you take her?
I took her due west of the theater, and I found an ambulance there, and they had their stretcher out, and I laid her on the stretcher, and at that point I realized that she had died.
Were there paramedics around?
Yes. Yes, there were.
Were you aware of whether or not they transported her?
I was aware of the way they looked at me, that she had probably died, and they did transport her to Children's Hospital.
Did you ever learn who that child was?
Yes.
And who was she?
It was a little girl named Veronica Mosier.
After you had taken Veronica Mosier, and she also known as Veronica Mosier Sullivan,
Yes, ma'am.
after you had taken her outside, what did you do?
After I placed her on the pram of the ambulance, I turned around and went back to the theater, at which point I encountered 2 girls carrying a teenaged black boy who had been shot in the leg. And I said, "Can I help you girls?" And they gave him to me, and I carried him over to where a fire engine was. And I set him with other wounded people next to the fire engine.
What did you do next?
My next recollection is a firefighter asked me if I had a police car close by, and I said that I did, and he said, "Bring it up here." And I did that,
And bring it up to where?
bring it up to where the fire engine was.
And where's the fire engine located?
The fire engine was located kind of on the northwest side of the theater, is what I would describe.
So kind of on the front corner facing the mountains.
Yes,
Did you take your car up there?
I did, ma'am.
What happened next?
The firefighter put a man by the name of Mike White into the front seat, and I could tell that Mike had been shot in the chest, and he put a teenage girl into the back seat that appeared to have had her lower lip injured somehow.
Did you have a name for her?
Her first name was Michaela. I'm not recalling her first name right now.
Did you transport these two people?
The firefighter quietly told me that I needed to get to the hospital quick with the man in the front seat, and yes, I did.
When he said that you needed to get there quickly, what did you take that to mean?
That the bullet wound to the chest was severe and I needed to go quickly to the emergency room.
Did you do that?
I did.
What hospital did you go to?
I went to the University Hospital emergency room.
Where is that located in relation to the theater?
It's on East Colfax Avenue at approximately Xanadu Street.
How long did it take you to get there?
I would say that I went there very quickly because I could tell that Mr. White was hurt pretty bad.
Was he conscious?
He was.
Was he able to talk to you?
A little bit.
When you were headed towards University, now Aurora South Hospital, would that have been closer?
Yes, ma'am, it would have been.
Did you decide not to go to Aurora South?
I had heard radio transmissions stating that Aurora South was no longer able to take patients. They were full.
When you went to University, did you see any other police cars there at that time?
I was the first police car to arrive at University.
Did you advise the doctors at the emergency room of any kind of information?
I did. I was approached by a doctor, I'm assuming a doctor, and he said, I need to know what's going on. I need to know what's coming in. And I told him, you can expect a lot more people coming in that have been shot.
Did any other cars arrive, police cars arrive, while you were at University Hospital?
Yes, ma'am. Approximately 4 or 5 more Aurora police cars arrived after I had unloaded people from my car.
After you had unloaded your patient at University, where did you go?
I assisted officers in unloading the other cars that arrived, and then I went back to the theater.
And now I'd like to have you step down for a moment and point out a couple of things that you described on the model, if I may. Is that all right, Your Honor?
Yes, and Ms. Higgs, you can move around.
And if you could, have you seen this model before?
Yes, I saw it briefly
And
today.
I'm going to ask you to stand over on this side if you can.
Okay.
Just so we don't block the jury. Does it fairly and accurately represent the Century 16 Theater 9 that you were in on July 20th of 2012?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it assist you to explain where you found some of the people in the theater to show them on the model?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you this as well, and we may have to turn it a couple of times so that the jurors can see it. So we'll do this 2 times. So first of all, when you first came into the theater and indicated that you encountered a person, where did you encounter the first person inside the theater?
As I recall, approximately in this area, I could look over and see him.
And you're pointing to the first couple of rows in the stadium seats on what would be the right side of the theater facing the screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And oops. Let's pull this around a little bit. And again, could you show that again to the other half of the jury?
Approximately in this area here.
So right above the first rows of the stadium seating in the theater on the right side.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you encounter, and that was the person that you indicated had been shot in the head?
Yes, ma'am.
The man who'd been. Now, you indicated that you had located 2 girls in the theater.
Yes.
Where were they?
Approximately down here in this area.
And you're pointing down to near the exit door? of
Yes.
Theater 9?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that door then lead outside?
It does.
This group? Can you point again for the other group of jurors?
Right about here.
To the area beside the exit door in Theater 9 in the front of the theater.
Yes.
on the right. Now, you also indicated that you found other people in the theater.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you locate other people in the theater?
man that was bald and very pale was located approximately here.
And are you above or below the stadium seating?
He was on the ground. He was on the floor right here in the stadium seating.
Okay. So you're pointing to about the first row of the stadium seating?
Yes.
And when you were asked to pick up Veronica Mosier-Sullivan, where was she in the theater?
Approximately in this area here.
And you're pointing near the exit door at the front of the theater on the right side?
Yes, ma'am.
The person that you were indicating, the bald person who was pale with his eyes open in the theater, where did you locate that person?
Approximately right here.
In the first or so row of the, is that in the, are you showing?
The
in
first
stadium-
row, yes.
First row of the
And
stadium seating?
the woman that had been shot in the calf was very close by him.
And Veronica Mosier-Sullivan, where did you locate her?
Approximately right in here.
In the front of the theater on the right side near the exit?
Yes.
You can take the stand again. When you returned to the theater after taking Mr. White and the person, Michaela, to University Hospital, you did return to the theater?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What did you do at the theater?
My next recollection is Sergeant Stanton asked me to start taking names and recording photos of people that had been in Theater 9.
Did you do that?
I did.
When you were you still at the theater?
I was in the theater parking lot.
Did you see injured people in the theater parking lot at that point?
Yes, ma'am, I saw one more.
And who was that?
I'm not sure of his name. He asked me to help him find his wife, and his face was covered in blood. And as I looked at him harder, I could see bright silver pieces of metal sticking out of his face.
Did he seem to be aware that he had metal sticking out of his face?
He seemed unaware of that.
How would you describe this person's demeanor?
I would describe it as kind of shell-shocked.
When you think back to how the people in the theater looked that you observed when you went into the theater on July 20th of 2012, how would you describe overall the demeanor of the people who were in the theater when you
Some of them were verbally and physically upset, and there were some that were calmly walking out or calmly remaining seated.
When you first got into the theater, were they still trying to get people out of the theater?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there people who seemed resistant or unable to get up and walk even though they were capable of walking?
Yes, ma'am.
When you, after you'd seen the man who had shrapnel in his face, what did you do next?
I told him, sir, there's some metal sticking out of your face. You're going to need to come with me to an ambulance. And at that point, another police officer said, I've got this one, and I realized he was a police officer from Broomfield.
Did that surprise you?
It did, ma'am,
Why?
because Broomfield is a pretty significant distance from the city of Aurora.
Had you realized up to that point that officers from other jurisdictions had responded to the theater?
I became aware of that time that there were officers from all over the metro area.
Do you have any idea what time it was at this point?
I do not. I would guess half an hour since I became aware of it. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, that was a really bad question. Let me back up a second. At this point in the night, after you had returned from University Hospital, you'd seen the man in the parking lot, do you have any idea what time it was at that point?
I do not.
Do you have any sense of how long you spent on scene at the theater that night?
I would say maybe 20 minutes or more.
Before you first left to go to University Hospital?
Oh, no, in total,
In total?
I would say from the time I arrived at the theater to the time I found the man with some type of metal in his face, 20 minutes, I think. I'm
And
not
this,
sure.
and in that amount of time, you've been to University Hospital and back?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ultimately go to Gateway High School as well?
I did.
And when you went to Gateway High School, did you assist in interviewing or photographing witnesses?
I assisted in just kind of maintaining order with the people that had been at the theater that night.
Did you drive to Gateway in a police car or go on one of the buses?
I followed the buses in my patrol car.
At some point, did you get on one of the buses at Gateway?
I did.
When was that?
When the buses arrived at Gateway, I just got on to see who was in the buses and what was going on.
Did you have contact with anybody on a bus?
Yes, I did. I found a African-American man in his, I would say, late 60s who was not wearing a shirt.
What did you do?
I said, "Sir, where's your shirt at?" And I had a pretty good idea where it was. And he said I had to use it as a bandage.
What did you do?
I went onto another bus and I found a teenaged boy that had a white t-shirt on under his hoodie, and I asked him if I could have it, and that boy gave me the shirt, which I in turn gave to this man.
Were you able to ever find out who the man was that you gave the hoodie to?
Yes, I did.
Who was it?
It was a man by the name of Mike White Sr., and he used his shirt to try to bandage his son, Mike White, who I had taken to the hospital.
When you were finished with your work that night and had a chance to look at your car, how did the inside of your car look?
It was stained with a lot of blood on the passenger seat and the console where my police computer and my light and siren controls are.
One moment, please. Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Ms. Higgs, do you have any questions?
Thank you for what you did. I don't have any questions.
Does the jury have any questions? It looks like they may have a question. Hold on. Would counsel please approach? All right, sir, there are some questions that the jury has submitted that I have allowed pursuant to the rules of evidence and other rules of law that are applicable. The first question is as follows. Do you know if at the time that you arrived, someone had been apprehended? Were officers still searching for the suspect? And I don't want you to speculate. I'm just asking whether you know.
I did not know at that time.
Okay. The next question is as follows. Did you observe any injuries or fatalities on the lower flat part of the theater other than Veronica Mosier?
I observed injuries on the exterior of the theater, the east wall, the backside of the theater is my best answer to that.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up questions based on those questions? Ms. Pearson?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up questions from you, Ms. Higgs?
No, Your Honor.
All right, may this witness be released from his subpoena?
Amen.
Is there any objection? All right, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, if you would call Kaylan Bailey.
Hello. Get you to raise your right hand for me so that I can administer an oath. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay, please be seated. Could you tell us your full name, please?
Kaylan Marie Bailey,
And can you spell your first, middle name, and last names?
Kaylan, Marie, Marie, Bailey, Bailey.
I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone as much as possible, all right? So if you would scoot up, and then you can move the microphone if you need to. Thank you, Ms. Tishmaguire.
Thank you.
Miss Bailey, will you please tell us how old you are?
I'm 16,
On July 20th of 2012, how old were you?
13,
Where do you go to school?
Rangeview High School.
And do you recall going to the Century 16 movie theater on July 19th of 2012 in Aurora, Colorado?
Yes, I do.
Did that go into the early morning of July 20th, 2012?
Yes.
Now, what do you recall about the day of July 19th, 2012?
I invited my friend Haley over to help me babysit Veronica.
And who's Veronica?
She's my cousin's girlfriend's daughter,
Okay, and who's your cousin?
Jameson
And what's Jameson's last name?
Toes.
Can you spell that for the record?
Jameson, Jamison, Toes, Toews.
And could you spell Haley's full name for the record as well, please?
Hailee, Hensley, Hensley.
And did you know Jameson's girlfriend's name?
Ashley,
And what was Ashley's full name?
Ashley Mosier, Ashley Moser.
Now, are you related to Jameson?
Yes, he's my cousin.
Now, are you related at all by blood to Ashley?
No,
So are you related by blood at all to Veronica?
no.
And do you know Veronica's full name?
Veronica Mosier Sullivan, Vercon, Ver.
It's all right, Veronica's a tough name to spell.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, and you don't have to spell it. You're okay. So, how were you asked to babysit Veronica that day?
Ashley and Jameson asked me to watch her while they went to Ashley's appointment for her baby.
Okay. And did she have a baby at the time, or was she pregnant?
She was pregnant.
Yes. Okay, the objection is overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Tish McGuire.
Your Honor, I can't remember if she answered the question or not. I apologize.
She did answer the question, so move on to your next question, please.
All right. So what time did you babysit Veronica that day?
I can't remember.
Do you recall if it was in the afternoon or the morning?
It was
Do you recall if it was in the afternoon or the morning?
it was in the afternoon.
And did Haley babysit with you?
Yes.
At some point in time, did Ashley and Jameson return to pick up Veronica?
Yes.
What happened at that time?
They just hung out and they talked to my parents about how the appointment went, and then we all went downstairs because Veronica wanted to play pool, and so we just hung out downstairs.
I assume you have a pool table downstairs.
Yes, in my basement.
What'd you do after you played pool with Veronica?
We just talked, and then Jameson brought up the Batman movie, and he said that it was coming out tonight. And then Veronica got really excited, and she said she wanted to go see it, but she wanted me and Haley to come. And so Jameson asked my parents if that would be okay, and they said yes.
How did you get tickets for the Batman movie that night?
Well, we waited at the house for a little bit, and then I don't remember what time, but we went to the theater to buy our tickets, and then we left.
And do you recall approximately what time you got to the movie theater that night?
Do you mean the first or the second time?
The first time you went to the theater. Tell us about the first time you got to the theater.
I don't remember what time it was.
And what'd you do the first time you got to the theater?
We just went there to buy our tickets, and then we realized how early it was, so then we left.
And what time did you get back? The second time you went to the theater?
I would say maybe around 10 o'clock.
What'd you do when you got to the theater that second time?
We went to go find our seats in the theater, and then we had a long time left, so we went to the arcade for a little bit. Me, Haley, Jameson, Veronica went to the arcade, and we just hung out, and then we got bored there, so we went back to the theater, and we kind of just sat there. And then me and Haley went to use the restroom, and Veronica wanted to come.
Now, was anyone else with you, or was it just the four of you? So you said that it was you and Haley and Veronica and Jameson that went to the arcade. Was anyone else with you?
No.
Was Ashley with you?
She wasn't with us in the arcade.
Okay. And did she stay seated in the theater saving your seats?
Yes.
And do you remember where you guys got seats in the theater?
Yes, we were the third or fourth row back. I think you call it the stadium seating. And I don't remember how far in we were.
When you and Haley then, did you take Veronica to the bathroom with you and she asked you to take you to the bathroom with her?
Yes.
And what did you do after that?
Then we went back into the theater and we just waited for the movie.
Do you recall what shoes Veronica was wearing that night?
Yes, they were shoes that I had given her earlier when I was babysitting.
And what did they look like?
They were like a gold sandals that came up to the ankle with chains, like little chains on them.
So now when you went back to your seats, do you remember what you did while you were waiting for the movie to begin?
All I remember is just sitting there waiting, talking with each other.
Do you remember if there were previews before the movie?
I don't remember what previews played.
But were there previews that you remember?
Yeah.
And then did the Batman movie actually start at some point?
Yes.
And then at some point did something happen during your movie?
Yes, what seemed to me, what I thought was originally a prank. This rocket thing shot across the theater from the right side of the theater to the left side, and then it seemed as if everyone in unison turned their heads to see what it was.
What do you remember after that?
I remember a lot of popping sounds, and I wasn't sure what they were at the time, and then it seemed like instantly after the first round of gunshots went off, Ashley had jumped on top of Veronica and they fell to the floor.
Now, where were you seated at that point in time when you saw that happen?
I was still sitting, and I just remember being really confused, and I was looking around me, and everyone seemed to start panicking, and then I realized something wasn't right, so I slouched down in my chair a little bit and just waited, and then I started to slouch down more, and I looked up, and Haley was still sitting there, so I told her to get down, and then we both went to the floor.
What do you remember happening when you got down to the floor?
The first thing I remember when I was down on the floor was looking up, and I saw Jameson standing up, and he had touched his head, and there was blood trickling down from his head.
Were you hearing anything go on when you're seeing this?
I was hearing just a lot of popping sound, gunshots, and the movie was still playing, and people were screaming, and
So after you saw Jameson standing up with blood trickling down his head, what do you remember after that?
I remember him turning to the row behind us and telling people to get down, and then he got down to the floor.
What do you remember after he got down to the floor?
I remember he kept poking his head out. Well, we all did. We all kept poking our heads out to see if we could see who was shooting or where it was coming from and what was going on. But every time the bullets would go and then they'd stop, and every time they'd stop I'd look up, but when they started to go again I'd duck down. And I remember Ashley popped her head up one time, and then she jolted and she fell back down.
And how did she fall down?
She fell on top of Veronica with her chest on top of Veronica.
And could you tell what was going on with Veronica at that time?
No, I couldn't. I kept asking her if she was okay, and she wasn't really responding. All she did was moan, and I could see what looked like skin on her stomach.
What do you remember after Ashley collapsing on top of Veronica?
I remember she kept screaming Veronica's name, and I kept telling her that she was okay, and I knew she was okay because I had my hand on her stomach to see if she was breathing, and she was. So I kept telling Ashley that Veronica was okay, and so then Ashley stopped yelling her name when I told her that Veronica was okay.
What do you remember after Ashley finally stopped screaming her name?
I remember asking Haley for her phone to call 911, and Haley gave it to me, and I called 911, and I took my hand away for just a moment, and then when I put my hand back on her stomach, it wasn't moving, and she wasn't breathing anymore, and then when the 911 operator answered, she was asking me what was happening, and I told her that there was a shooting at Century 16, and she asked me if anyone was injured, and I told them yes, we had an injured child, and then she told me to give Veronica CPR, and I told her that I couldn't because Ashley, her mom, was on top of her, and I couldn't reach her chest, and she just kept telling me to give her CPR, and I kept telling her that I couldn't because I couldn't get to her chest. And the next thing I remember was giving Haley her phone, and she was talking to the 911 operator after that, but I don't know what they were discussing.
What do you remember after you handed the phone to Haley?
I remember turning back to Veronica, and I was yelling at Jameson, and there was just so much happening. The movie, I can't remember if the movie was still playing at this point, but there were people screaming, and I was screaming Veronica's name, and I was telling Jameson that we had to get out, and I was telling him that we had to move Ashley because I had to help Veronica, and he told me that he couldn't move her
And were you able to talk to Ashley at this point in time?
No, I don't remember ever trying to talk to Ashley.
So what do you remember after Jameson saying that he couldn't help you move her?
The next thing that I remember is the lights coming on, and I slowly peeked my head up, and I couldn't see anyone or any threat in the building, and then police officers started coming in with gas masks, and I just remember that everything seemed so slow, like it just seemed like no one was moving fast enough. And me and Jameson were yelling that we had a child, and a police officer came up to me and Haley, and he kind of moved us down the aisles, down the stairs. And I remember stepping over a body and stepping over multiple pools of blood, and he led us to this exit, and then I just remember sitting on the curb, and it was me and Haley. We didn't have any adults. Jameson was still in the theater, and then one of the Century 16 managers came over and sat with us.
What do you remember after the manager sitting with you?
I remember constantly looking to the exit door that we came out of, looking for Jameson, but the manager kept telling me not to look and kept making me look away. And then an officer came over and told us to sit behind this van and don't move unless she told us to. And then I saw this man running toward us, and I thought it was Jameson at the time, and so I told her, that's my cousin, so she let me go. So I ran to this man, but it turned out it wasn't Jameson, but he let us sit in his car until someone came to help.
And who was it that came to help you?
It was a road construction person, a woman. She came, and I didn't have any shoes on, so she carried me across the newly paved road to my dad.
And how did your dad know to come get you?
I had called him when we had gotten out of the theater.
And what happened when you met up with your dad?
We took Haley to her mom because she couldn't get anywhere close to the theater. And so we took her to her mom, and then we went to Aurora South.
Why'd you go there?
Because we knew that Jameson was there.
What happened when you got to Aurora South?
I met up with my family, and we were just waiting to hear about Veronica and Ashley and everyone.
Were you able to see what sort of injuries Jameson had when you got to the hospital?
Yes, he was shot in his head.
And was anyone else at the hospital other than Jameson when you got to Aurora South?
Ashley was at the hospital, but I never saw her.
Were you told what happened to Ashley?
Yes.
Did you eventually get to meet with Ashley and see her injuries?
I never actually saw her injuries. I just saw the after effects of them.
And what do you know about the after effects of them?
I know that she was paralyzed from the waist.
Overruled?
You can answer the question.
I know that she was paralyzed from the waist down, and she had a miscarriage.
Sustained.
Now, did you learn that Ashley was paralyzed?
I'm sorry?
Did you learn that Ashley was paralyzed?
Yes.
What did you learn about what happened to Veronica?
Well, when I had first got to Aurora South, no one knew where she was. She wasn't with Jameson or Ashley. She was by herself, and my mom went looking in every hospital, but no one was letting her in because they still hadn't caught the man.
And are you talking about the shooter from the theater?
Is that a yes?
Yes.
At some point in time, were you told what ultimately happened to Veronica?
Yes, my dad had told me.
What'd you learn?
Sustained?
Did you ever see Veronica alive again?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1109?
Yes.
Kaylan, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
It's my labeling of Theater 9.
Does that diagram fairly and accurately represent where you were seated in the theater on July 20th of 2012 and what you observed in the theater of July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move for admission.
Any objection to Exhibit 1109? No. All right, it's admitted and may be published.
All right, Kaylan, I'm going to ask you a favor. There's a big pointer next to you on the side of your thing. I'm going to ask you to approach that diagram and show for the jury where you are seated. And if you could tell us about where everybody was seated.
So this is Haley.
Hold on a second. Let us give you a microphone. We're going to give you a microphone. Please speak into the microphone if you can. Do you think you can hold the microphone with one hand and the pointer with the other? Yeah. Great. All right. Thank you.
So this is Haley, me, Veronica, Ashley, and Jameson. And this is how we entered to the theater. And then approximately from over here is where I say the gas launched across and then it landed somewhere over here.
And how did you end up exiting the theater?
A police officer came and pulled me and Haley down these stairs and then out this door.
Right, thank you very much. You can take your seat. Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what's been marked as Exhibit 4731?
Yes.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes,
What is it a photograph of?
it's a picture of Veronica.
Is that the person that you went to the theater with that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may now approach the witness with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1103.
Yes.
Thank you. Kaylan, what did I just hand you?
It is a surveillance footage of Veronica in the lobby of the theater.
Did you have a chance to view that entire video clip?
Yes, I did.
Does it fairly and accurately represent what Veronica looked like the evening of July 19th of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move for admission.
Any objection? No objection. Okay, without objection, 1103 is admitted and may be published. Does this have any sound, Ms.
There's
Tisha?
no sound, Your Honor.
Okay.
Did you recognize the person in that diagram?
Yes.
Excuse me, in that video? Yep. And where was Veronica in that video?
She was the little girl in the pinkish purplish shirt.
Did you recognize the shoes she was wearing in that video?
Yes.
Were those the shoes that you had given her that day?
Yes.
And Your Honor, may I also please publish at this time People's Exhibit 4731?
I don't think you moved its admission. You had to identify it.
I apologize. Your Honor, did that picture, sorry, Kaylan, The picture in 4731, did that fairly and accurately represent what Veronica looked like the night of July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move for admission of People's Exhibit 4731.
Any objection? No. Without objection, 4731 is admitted and may be published.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Billy, I'm handing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1036. Do you know what that document is?
Yes.
What's that?
It's my 911 tape.
Okay, and do you recognize your handwriting on that?
It's not mine, it's my mom's.
Okay. Is your mom with you when you listened to that 911 tape?
Yes.
Okay, did you listen to it its entirety?
Yes.
Does it fairly and accurately represent the 911 call that you made on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move for the admission of that exhibit.
Any additional objection to Exhibit 1036? No. All right. Based on my previous ruling, Exhibit 1036 is admitted and may be published.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Crime in progress or life-threatening emergency?
There's been a shooting.
Okay, is this the Century 16's theater shooting?
Yes.
Do you know anybody who's been shot?
Yes, I do.
Okay, who's been shot? Who do you know that's been shot?
My two cousins.
Okay, where are they right now?
They're sitting on the floor of the store.
Are they breathing or are they... Ma'am, do you know if they're breathing and do you know if they're conscious?
One of them's not breathing.
Either one of them are breathing?
One of them are breathing.
Okay, the one that's not breathing, I need you to go up to him and... Is he laying on the ground? Okay, is he on the floor on a hard flat surface?
They're on a hard surface.
Okay, remove anything from under his head and kneel by his side.
What?
Kneel by his side and remove anything from under his head.
I can't. They're in between the chairs.
Okay, which theater are you in?
I'm number 9. I'm in number 9.
Okay, do you see any officers near you?
No, there's not. None.
Okay, I need you to go to your cousin that is not breathing and go by his side and kneel.
Okay.
Place your hands on his forehead and the fingertips of your other hand under his chin. Push down his forehead and lift up under his chin until his head tilts back and the chin points up.
I can't hear you. The movie is too loud.
Okay, I need you to look into his mouth. Do you see anything in his mouth?
Do I see anything on the ground?
In his mouth.
I can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Okay, ma'am, that's okay. Can you put your ear to his mouth and see if he's breathing?
He's not. I'm the only one that says that he's not.
Okay, his chest is not moving and he's not breathing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, we need to start chest compressions. I'm going to walk you through the steps. Are you ready?
What?
We need to start chest compressions, and I will walk you through the steps. We need to start CPR. Ma'am, we need to start CPR. I can tell you how to do it, okay? I'm going to walk you through the steps.
What?
I'm going to walk you through the steps of CPR.
I can't hear you.
Okay, is there an officer next to you?
Yeah.
Oh, ma'am.
Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We need to start CPR on your cousin, okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, I can tell you how to perform the CPR, but I need you to listen, okay? There's nobody here. Ma'am. Oh, there's no gun in there. Ma'am. Can you hear me, ma'am? Ma'am, I have help on the way, but I need you to listen to me, okay? Okay. Kneel next to your cousin who's been shot and is not breathing. Ma'am. Ma'am, I need you to start CPR on your cousin. Can you hear me? I will walk you through how to perform CPR. Ma'am, I cannot hear you. Hello, ma'am. I understand that, and I need the cousin who's been shot and is not breathing. We need to perform CPR on him. I cannot hear you, ma'am. The police are with you? Okay, speak with the police. Okay, thank you. Thank you, bye.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any questions, Ms. Spangler? Let's see if the jury has any questions. I don't see any questions. May this witness be released from her subpoena. Is there any objection? All right, thank you. Members of the jury, it's almost 5, so we're going to go ahead and adjourn for the day. I want to remind you that all the admonishments that I have given you continue to apply. They all apply over the break tonight, and so you need to comply with each and every one of those admonishments, and each and every one of you must do so. Those are mandatory. Those are extremely important, and so I very much appreciate your compliance with all those. Tomorrow, we will plan to start at the usual time, which is 8:40. That means we need you to get here at about 8:15 or so, okay? I think that worked out well today, gave you a chance to get here, get settled in, and then we were able to start on time. So I would like to keep that schedule if we can. Okay, with that, folks, have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:15. Thank you. The record should reflect that the jurors have now exited the courtroom. Everyone may be seated. I sustain the objection with respect to the statement by the last witness related to Ms. Mosher Sullivan having lost her pregnancy, because at the bench conference that I had with counsel, we agreed that we were going to hold off on any additional questions with respect to that until we discussed the issue. And I know that Ms. Tish-McGuire didn't ask a question to specifically elicit that information, but given that the statement was made and given what we had talked about at the bench, I felt that the appropriate ruling would be to sustain it. I thought about it for a moment, and then in the end I decided that because we have not had any further discussion, I should sustain it. So is this something that the prosecution is intending to introduce at some future point, Ms. Tish-McGuire?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And so should we have a discussion about this, and is now the time? Are you prepared to do it now? And is the defense prepared to argue it now?
Your Honor, I prefer to just bring some authority to the court's attention that we believe supports and should be moving the ball in this case.
Do you have that authority?
I think I can have a day or two, Your Honor, to get that authority. I appreciate that.
All right, does the defense, if the defense wants to submit some authority, I would like to see it as well. So just give it to me. In the meantime, advise your witnesses that they are not to go there until I've made a ruling on that, okay? So the sooner you can give me those cases, the better for everyone. All right, I know there's an outstanding issue in terms of the jail records as well. I don't know whether you want to put that off until Thursday when we're going to talk, or if you're ready to proceed on that issue, Mr. Orman.
Well, I know that Mr. King was gonna consider one issue, and I don't know if he's ready to yet, so.
I prefer if we could put that off, Judge.
Can we put it off to Thursday?
Yes.
All right, we'll put it off to Thursday, okay? So remind me on Thursday then that that's a second issue we have to address.
Your Honor, can I just mark the model as exhibit number 1087?
1087? Yes, so 1087 will be the model.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And the model is for demonstrative purposes, correct?
Correct, Your Honor. At this week.
And I think I ruled on an objection with respect to the use of the model as a demonstrative exhibit in the past. And so I've allowed it as a demonstrative exhibit, and for now, it's Exhibit 1087. And it's with the court's permission that it has been used here in court as a demonstrative exhibit. All right, is there anything else on behalf of the people, Mr. Orman?
Yes, Ron, I'd like to make a motion. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that this case intended to do anything improper, but the reason I'm doing this in case it happens in the future, I can't but in lieu of cross-examination, I want to ask Officer Hawkins, or thank him for what he had done. And I am not in any way saying that that was not an appreciative sentiment on her. Not think that in court in front of the jury, appropriate time for an attorney to express gratitude for a police officer doing their job as a first responder, it could be seen as an attempt to ingratiate.
Oh, can you use the microphone, please? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
You can just go to the podium. It might be easier. Thank you. So,
It could-
Mr. Orman, go ahead.
Do you want me to start over, Your Honor?
Why don't you?
Your Honor, and again, I am not trying to insinuate that Ms. Higgs intended to do anything improper, but for the last officer, the sergeant that testified, she did not cross-examine him, but she thanked him for what he had done. And I am not, that is a noble sentiment, to be sure. And I'm not saying it's a false sentiment, but it could be seen, Your Honor, as an attempt to ingratiate oneself or one's side with the jury. It is proper, I think, to thank a juror for answering questions, but to thank a witness for answering questions, but for an attorney to get involved with thanking an officer for doing something like this, I think is improper, and I don't think it was done for an improper intentional purpose, but I would ask that the court order that that not happen again.
Okay, Ms. Higgs, any response? The request is granted. I agree with Mr. Orman that that is improper for an attorney to do. So if you don't have any questions, all you have to do is stand up and say, I have no questions. Is there anything else on behalf of the people? Anything else on behalf of the defense? All right, thank you, folks. I'll see you tomorrow morning, usual time. The court will be in recess. Thank you.